I'm truly delighted to have this opportunity to come and address you today on a subject which is much, much lighter. Okay, so this is not about foreign affairs and this is not about nationalism. This is a few leadership lessons that I have learned in my own life. All of you are young. You're all going to make your own mark in life very soon. Many of you, I hope, will go on to greater things, ennobling things, contributions to society, contributions to mankind. Who knows, contributions of the century might come out of your hands. All that this man can offer you are a few lessons gleaned from his own life. And that is what I would like to focus on. There's a picture here of Roger Federer, and you'll wonder, why have I put Roger Federer here? Roger Federer was once upon a time called the enfant terrible of tennis. He had a mistimed ponytail. He threw his rackets in court. Wasn't considered to be in the best behavior because of tantrums. But then something happened. He lost his coach when he was very young. That set the path for him to redeem himself. Federer was never and wasn't always consistent. In 2001, he beat Pete Sampras. In 2002, in Wimbledon, he was out in the first round. And yet, in 2017, age 35, he won the 8th Wimbledon title and the 19th Grand Slam, which makes him an all-time great in the world of tennis and truly a sports icon to all of you, not only here, but across the world. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this because time and circumstance can be molded by individual actions. The more we put our actions to fate, the less we will be successful in what we do. Roger Federer is an example of how you can overcome the inner devil in yourself and become a much better human being and an outstanding sports person. Probably one of the greatest humans that we have seen in a long, long time, Nelson Mandela. He said, the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. You're all still very young, so your failure is an exam. Your failure is not getting an A+ on a test and you go back home and your mom says, why didn't you get an A+? And your dad is pretty cross and he comes and says, why didn't you get an A+? And you know you're capable of it. Or you probably lose in a soccer match, or you probably lose in a tennis match, or you lose in a cricket match. Or worse still, probably a relationship on Facebook becomes a thumbs down because your lives are determined by likes. Your generation is very interesting. You are all Facebook likes and face-to-face dislikes. That's how you define yourself. It's a very interesting way of defining yourself, but that's how you define yourself. So if you get a Facebook dislike, then that kind of sets you off on a motion that says, I will not have dinner, I don't like the food, I don't like this, I don't like that. But the fact of the matter is, my young friends, life is all about walking, falling, getting up again, and doing your best. Life is not about a journey straight up. Any of us here in this room who are older than you have faced it. I didn't become what I became by a straight trajectory. I'm sure the general didn't become a general by just waiting in his wings and saying that he'll become a general. In the same manner, all of you will have to make that effort to get where you have to go to. And here's where I would like to share a few stories with you. So my own story is the fact that, yes, I was introduced as someone who had a master's degree in economics. I actually wanted to join the civil service. But at that time, in the civil service, I was told by my dad that a company that would normally, if they ever came to your campus for interviews, is a very good job to take or a very good interview to take. So Hindustan Lever, which is now called Hindustan Unilever, came at that time to the Delhi School of Economics, the only time they came in some 40 odd years. I went through that interview and lo and behold, I got selected. I wasn't interested. I didn't want the job, but I got selected. So I called up my dad and I told him, I said, he was in the government. I said, why should I join this company? He said, what is the salary they are giving? In those days, salaries mattered. Nowadays, purpose matters for you. But in those days, salaries mattered. So I told him my salary. He said, that's only about 30% lower than what I'm getting after 30 years. So you might as well take it because you'll probably land up earning more than me by the time you retire. So I joined Hindustan Lever with a degree in economics, specialization in monetary economics. I had nothing to do with management. When I was first asked to handle a case study, I looked around and said, what is a case study? Economics is all about theorems and hypotheses and prognostications and trends. It's not about case studies. So you learned the tricks of management by experience. And you built one characteristic in yourself, and that's what I call the underdog syndrome. I may not have the qualifications to get me there, but I have the grit and determination to make it happen. Many times, my young friends, it's not who you are, it is not what qualifications you hold, but what you do with what you have that matters. Hence began my career. I moved across 2 companies. I was at Hindustan Lever. I then went on to sell toothpaste at Colgate and finally landed up in Nestle. Nestle, as you know, makes Maggi. It also makes Kit Kat. It also makes Milkmaid. I hope all these brands are brands that you consume, yes or no? Right. So, interesting company. It's nice to be in the company because every time you get to taste something, it's something yummy. So I don't have to bite into steel. I don't have to bite into cement. I just have to bite into noodles, right? So that's interesting part of my job. After a few years, I was sent off to Thailand to work in a different culture, taking care of the company operations there. I came back to India and then was sent off to Singapore. Singapore is a lovely country, beautiful country. Everything is perfect, everything works, nothing can go wrong. So I spent about 3 years there, was extremely happy. My daughter finished school, went on to university, we had nice friends and everything happened. Till one day my boss called me up and he said, I think you've had it too good in Singapore. Now we want to send you to Egypt. I said, fine, why Egypt? He said, yeah, Egypt is a nice country. Nothing has changed in 100 years, right? The dictator then, Hosni Mubarak, was there for 33 years. Before him was Sadat. He was also there for a long time till he got assassinated. Before that was Nasser. He was also there for a long time. Before that were the pharaohs for 5,000 years. So nothing ever changed. So he said, look, this is the place, nothing ever changes. Normally we send people closer to retirement because it's a nice posting. If you work out of Africa, you work in Burundi and Botswana and God knows whichever else, you dust yourself in Cairo and then you retire and go home. But you're still relatively younger than that. So go there and work because you'll love the place. So I said, fantastic, went there. So that's the Sphinx. Those of you who haven't visited Egypt, go there. If you want to see what civilization is, go to Egypt. They still have preserved a lot of their civilization, which sadly in our country we destroy. They have preserved it. It may not be what it was in the pharaonic times, but it is still a beautiful country. So in this beautiful country, my wife and I went and we loved the place. And lo and behold, the Arab Spring. 2011, 25th January, Police Day. And we all thought that we're going to be celebrating the police. Even Hosni Mubarak thought we're going to be celebrating the police. And what happens? A number of young people come to this place called Tahrir Square, Freedom Square, and they start protesting. A small protest became a bigger protest, became a larger protest, became an even larger protest. And the protest that started out of a situation in Tunisia where a young Bouzid committed suicide. because he couldn't sell his fruits on a cart, transformed itself into a full-blown agitation in Egypt. Very soon, the internet was cut, because that's what good governments do. They cut the internet. They don't want you to talk, right? They don't want you to contact anyone. Very soon, all the streets got empty, riots began, and the country gradually started shutting down. So I called up my boss and I told him, this is what you meant. Nothing changes. Everything has changed. And I can't speak a word of Arabic. And I'm supposed to be the chairman of Nestle Egypt. For God's sake, Egypt, Sudan and Libya. So I had this beautiful triumvirate of 3 countries. I don't know which one is worse than the other, but that's what it was, right? Not speaking a word of the language, wanting to run an operations in a country, not understanding even what the hell was happening, because half the time it was so difficult to even figure out what was happening. But then I realized that this is where grit and determination, this is where your adaptability counts. Your adaptability, my friends, will not come out of your capability to try and learn all the lessons through books. It is to learn lessons from your teachers, learn lessons from your parents, learn lessons from your friends, learn lessons from looking at others, because they can be the best source of guidance for you. During this time, we had in the first 10 days massive riots. We couldn't operate our factories, we shut down our factories. In fact, I requested the Egyptian army to plant a tank in front of the factory, because otherwise it would have got looted. At the end of 10 days, Hosni Mubarak finally decided that he will go. And there's a joke about Hosni Mubarak that Gabriel from heaven once came down to tell him that it's time for you to leave. Mubarak looked at Gabriel and said, oh, but where are the people going? So that was Mubarak for you. He didn't want to leave that country, didn't want to leave where he was, but his people wanted him to go. So at the end of 10 days, we went to the factory. I went with one of my colleagues, and we said, and about 15 to 20% of that factory were manned by women. Women were running part of that factory. I was expecting 5 or 10 people to come up. I thought maybe 10 people will come, 15 people will come, out of a factory of 1,000 people. I go there, my young friends, and 900 out of 1,000 people were there. They braved all the riots, they braved all the difficulties, and yet they came. They came because they loved the country, they loved the company. And what's more, during this entire crisis, neither me nor my team ever left the country. I honestly felt safer in Delhi, safer in Cairo than I feel in Delhi today, right? My wife felt far safer in the streets of Cairo than she has felt ever in any part of the city. And the fact of the matter is that age-old civilizations come together and they treat people with dignity. So the people said, my workers said, you never left us. How can we leave you? And how can we leave the company? My first lesson, and whether you lead a team of 1, or you lead a team of 100, or you lead a team of 100,000, your first lesson in life when you start your work is a leader never leaves. It's nice to run away. It's nice to get away from a problem and say, this is not my problem. After all, it is their country, it's not even my country. But the fact of the matter is, if you have to lead, you need followers. And for followers to happen, they must see something in the leader. And the first element in a leader that people see is, can I trust him? Can I trust this man? Can I follow him? Can we go after him? Can we do things? You have it in your own schools, I presume. You have committees and you have different things. You have teams, sports teams. Who takes the orders of the captain? The players. Why do they take the orders of the captain? Not because he is just the captain, but because you can trust this man or trust this boy or trust this girl to take the right decisions. That's why you trust them. So a leader never leaves. This was the first lesson that I would like to share with you today. Ultimately, this is Tahrir Square. This phalanx was 24/7. But this is where the unity of the people count. The police vanished from the street. For 3 months, there were no police people, no policemen, because the policemen were most oppressive in the previous regime. So they would get thrashed if they would ever even show their face. You know who manned the traffic crossings? Who manned every single signal? Students. Students. These were students who came out and stood, and they stood and took the bashings of the police, wherever, all the military actually, the police were out of the streets, so of the military, but they stood there. They stood there and they manned every single crossing. Why do I say this to you? During this entire period, we could have, as a company, shut down and gone. But we said we will not. We will engage the country, we will engage the people, we will engage in performing better and more cohesively as a team. And indeed, we invested more in the country in that 5 years than we invested ever in the previous 10 years. And we grew much faster than we have ever grown before in the same country. What's important that even in the neighboring countries, there's an interesting incident that Muammar Gaddafi, I don't know how many of you even remember his name, Muammar Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya. Muammar Gaddafi used to give very long speeches, anywhere between 1 hour and 6 hours, and made his people listen to it. So they had to listen to him. At one speech, the speech before he was finally off the chair, he said, there are 2 problems that I face in this country, Al-Qaeda and Nescafe. He said, Nescafe uses hallucinogens, and this hallucinogen is making my youth mad, and therefore they are doing what they are doing. The next minute, there was a hit on the Nescafe site globally. Congratulations, you are the choice of the youth. So that's how the whole atmosphere was. But fundamentally, if you look at it, what was happening here? How could a person from a culture that is completely different from the culture of Egypt manage to do whatever you did during this period? It's because of one single principle, my friends, that people are at the heart of everything. You are all today, and unfortunately our world is making you your excellence on an individual basis. You get marks on an individual basis. You get graded on an individual basis. But your life is going to be on teams. I lead a team. The general led many teams. Battles are won when soldiers decide that the cause is more than their lives. That doesn't happen because the general gives out 200 rupees more to them. They do it because it hits them in the heart. They say, this is what I will do. The task of leadership is to ensure that you have the humility, that you have the courage, and you have the conviction that your people count. So in your own lives, embrace the people who are around you, because it is these people who will make a difference in all that you do. Third, we all like lives which are trouble-free. We don't like hassles. Who wants to have a difficult test? Who wants to have a difficult argument? Who wants to do anything difficult? Who wants to have obstacles? But the fact of the matter is, you will have obstacles. You will have difficulties. You will have problems. The good news is that if you look at adversity in the manner of looking at it as a strength, you will rise faster and you will rise smarter than if you look at adversity as a curse. Attitude, my young friends, is everything in your lives. 10 years from now, nobody will ask you which school you studied in. Nobody will ask you which university you went to. If you are in the workplace or if you are an entrepreneur, you're not going to flaunt your degree. You're not going to say, I'm from X, Y, Z university and therefore I'm running this enterprise. When leaders are chosen, they are not chosen by grade point average. Right? You don't ask, did you get 3.5, did you get 4, did you get 4.5, did you get 5? You look at them for the scars on their body, that shows how many adversities have they taken. If you look at adversity as a source of strength, you will become even stronger than what you are. Learn from your adversities. Pick up from your adversities. And I'll talk about an adversity that my company faced and how we came out of it. So this was Egypt. I was very happy for 5 years. Beautiful country, lovely place, lovely people. Absolutely fantastic environment. And then I was sent off to the Philippines. And I was told that the Philippines, the only issue in the Philippines is you have 19 typhoons each year. It's either 19 or 20. But they said, look, this is a typhoon, is something that everybody faces, so you're going to face it as well. Philippines has lovely golf courses. It has got nice people, very, very friendly people. And if you are in the Philippines, the one great part is any party you go to is basically karaoke. It is karaoke. I mean, you just have to learn to sing, otherwise you are dead. Because the whole country is singing all the time. Even in storm they sing, even in rain they sing, even in sunshine they sing. So I really enjoyed it. I loved it. 4 months down the line, I was at a friend's place for dinner when a phone rang. It was my top boss in Switzerland calling me up on a Saturday evening. I said, normally never happens that you call up somebody on a Saturday evening. And it was a lady. She called me up and she said, look, I have some news for you. So I said, look, can I call you up tomorrow because I'm in the middle of this dinner? She said, no, it's important. I said, what's it? She said, you know, we have this big problem with Maggi in India. And that was the time when this whole Maggi thing had flared up. And she said, I want you to go back to India and help the company. When you're hit with something like this, you're having a lovely party, lovely country, great golf courses, karaoke, right? You're happy, things are good, right? And suddenly you're told, that's a fire out there. Arnab Goswami has just called you the next big disaster after the Bhopal gas tragedy, and you want to go and put your hand there. And you want to go and put your hand there. I mean, you must be mad. My daughter told me, she said, this is bizarre. I mean, they can't find a bloke in the whole world. But then I called up my dad. My wise old father, I asked him, I said, look dad, I'm told this. My heart says I must go. He said, what your heart, put your head together also, you must go. Because if the company doesn't trust you, why would they put you to look after the worst crisis that it has faced in a 105-year history? Secondly, the team that I worked for in India is the team that has made me what I am. This is payback time, folks. In life, you will have those moments when it is payback time. When you have to look beyond yourself. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm in my mid to late 50s, right? I'm probably older than many of your parents, or probably as old as some of your parents. I don't have any desire in life to be bigger than what I am. I think God has been extremely kind to me. A guy with a plain master's degree in economics has come reasonably well in his life. But I said, if I can do something for the company and for the country and for the people, then I think that will be a life well spent. So I took the next flight and I was here in India to handle what was the biggest and the most testing time of all for the company. Maggi Noodles is a brand that is 34 years old. Your moms have consumed it, you have consumed it, your children will consume it, your grandchildren will consume it. It's a brand that has grown where everybody has their own impression about Maggi. Everyone has their own Maggi recipe. Everyone has their own Maggi flavor. Everyone has their own Maggi moment. Everyone has their own Maggi story. So you go to Leh and Ladakh, you'll find Maggi. You go deep down, you'll find Maggi. You go to Meghalaya, you'll find Maggi, right? You go to Rishikesh, you'll find Maggi. You go to Hyderabad, you've got a place called Cyberabad, where there is a AM PM cafe that sells only Maggi. And that brand was out of the shelf. I won't go into the details of what happened and why it happened, etc. That will be a topic for our next talk. But it's important to know that this was a huge crisis for the company. This crisis just didn't involve the company. over 9,000 employees. We have 5 factories out of 8 factories that make Maggi. They were all shut, closed. Fell sweep, gone. 400,000 wheat farmers who give wheat to make the flour for Maggi, gone. It's fairly big in terms of quantity, finding what to do with them. More than 6,500 people who work as salespeople, people who sell this product in the shops and get their earnings, gone. 1.3 million small shops that sell Maggi, anywhere from 500 rupees to 5,000 rupees per day, gone. It spilled across to Bangladesh. Suddenly the Bangladesh government said, oh, there's a problem with Maggi. So says the Indian authorities, ban it. Sri Lanka, oh, that must be a problem, ban it. And last but not the least, 1,700 distributors for whom it was anywhere between 30% to 50% of their business. Imagine if your dads came home with a salary check that was 50% less than what it was the previous month, and with no guarantees of the next salary check if they are working in companies. Or if they came on a business which has got wiped out, burnt, and they don't have the wherewithal to take care of expenses for the next couple of months, couple of years. You're all very far away from that, from the worries of running families, but you will get there one day. And then you will realize that the societal impact, the ecosystem impact of something like this is huge. So, the scale is huge, and this is the time, my friends, nobody has the recipe, nobody has the formula for you. You're sitting there lonely as a leader, surrounded by your team, who are looking at you and saying, what should we do? There is no book that is written, there is no formula that is there, there is no teacher to guide you, there is no professor to tell you this is the way you should do it. There are 200 people telling you 200 different things. That's when your inner strength comes. That's when your inner makeup comes. That is when your attitude to adversity comes. That is when your maturity and humility comes. That is when your receptiveness comes. And these are characteristics, my young friends, build in yourself today. Don't neglect. The problem with our systems is, in education, you are looked at from the point of view of what you can generate in terms of answers in physics and chemistry and biology and God knows what else. Building on character, building on values, building on purpose is unfortunately a lot less. I was privileged. I went to a school called Rishi Valley, where the core philosophy of the company, of the school, was to build purpose and values in children. My academic excellence is far less than any of you, but I can tell you a thing or two about what it takes to build values and to build purpose. And it is those things that will come to your use when you become older and when you have more burdens in your life. We took this as a challenge. We said we have to get Maggi back. Not only because it is such a big brand, but we had many consumers like you, who kept writing back to the company saying, we miss Maggi, we want it back. So we said one single purpose is we will get Maggi back as soon as possible. In life, my young friends, give a man a purpose, the rest will follow. Our problem is we don't work just for the money. I can throw money at you, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000. But if you work in a place without values and purpose, which is dissonant to you, you will not be able to work. But if I give you a purpose in life, if I give you an end goal in life, if I say this is what is good and meaningful for you and for society, you will give your everything to it. Give a man a purpose and I say magic happens. And it's exactly the magic that happened. On various things, and I won't bore you with this because this is not important. Everywhere, whether it is packaging material or raw material or posters or systems or campaigns, they were got ready in less than half the time. People traveled in trucks with packaging material from the supplier to the factory to ensure that production started. Why? Did I pay them more? No. Did I give them bonuses? No. Did I give them long letters of certification? No. Why did they do it? They did it because they had that purpose in their hearts. We must come back. We must rise again. We should be what we are. We are a proud company. At Nestle, we are a proud company. Many employees in this company spend 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. I've given out awards to people for 40 years of service. 20 they come in, 60 they go out. You can't just shoot them down one day saying you're a bunch of crooks. It doesn't work that way. For people who have led honest lives, vindication of that honesty is an important characteristic. You may think it is bravado, you may think sometimes it is stupid. It is not. For humans, what is the most important? You know, there are three big characteristics that people look for in corporations. The quality of the products, the way in which they treat their customers, and number three, the quality of the leadership. Is the leadership of this organization strong enough for it to withstand the test of time? And that's when it is important that as leaders, you stand tall. And you will stand tall not by all the strategy and all the documents and everything else that you will throw at people. You will stand tall by your purpose and by your values, by your humility, by your calmness, and by your ability to get people together. That is what will ultimately matter. Fourth lesson, never lose the mojo. You will go through times in life when you will think that, I think I've lost it. It happens, I can say in my own life, probably at 2 or 3 stages. One is in your 20s, when you suddenly feel, or one of course is when you are as old as you guys, university and getting into the right college and doing the right kind of stuff is a big source of stress, right? I don't know about your generation. My generation, we were dictated by our fathers. So my father said, do X, Y, and Z. He said, you must be an engineer. I said, I don't like maths. So he said, why? I'm an engineer. I said, you're an engineer? I don't know. I mean, I'm not good at it. So I went and did economics. I think he was quite ashamed that I went and did economics. Now he's quite happy with it. But then he did feel bad. Do what your talent is. Do what your purpose is. That's important. If you do it, then you will have the passion all through your life. I love my job. I don't think my job is a stressful job at all. You might wonder, how is he saying it? Because I love it. I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about my people. I'm passionate about my brands. I wear a Nestle symbol. I wear a Nestle shirt. I wear a Nestle tie. I love it. I don't do this because I need to do it. I do it because I love it. So when you do something and when you make your choices wisely. Because that choice is going to guide you all through your life. When you reach my age and you say, I wish I had become a pianist, but now I'm a stupid accountant, it's a bit too late. You can try again, but more as a hobby. You can't suddenly become a concert pianist very late in your lives. People do it, but it's rare. The next time that you lose your mojo is in your middle age. You're suddenly losing it. You're not getting promoted. You're not getting the big things. You're not getting the big breaks. And the third time you lose your mojo is when your kids start to neglect you. When they look at you and they say, Dad, I have got something else to do. You're all still too young to be parents, I hope. But for those who are parents here, the biggest hurt you feel is when your kid says, I don't have time for you. Right? It hurts. We do that to our parents too. Right? But you never think how they feel, but you know how you feel. So in all this, never lose your mojo. Never lose your spirit. What will keep you going? What will make you an individual? What will make you happy? Sometimes you will chase things, right? The important thing in life, and I say this in all honesty, is not how much of success you achieve, but how much of satisfaction and happiness you derive. Success is relative. More money, more Ferrari cars, better looking girlfriends and boyfriends. Is that success? I don't know. But as you go through life, you'll realize that you have to have a healthy mix of happiness and satisfaction and a deep sense of gratitude. You're all privileged children. You're all children from great schools, great families. Your parents have a lot of ambition for you. They have a lot of expectation from you. Learn to look at the other side of the fence. Learn to look at the people who don't have the things that you have. Maybe it will teach you a lesson in gratitude. It will also give you a lesson in humility. It will also give you a lesson in empathy. Empathy, compassion, gratitude are all important emotions that you need to have in order to never lose your mojo. Never waste a crisis is what we did as a company. We decided that we will show what we can, show the best that we can, and we did what we could. We launched more new products than we have done in the last 10 years. We put in more action into the marketplace, all done by the same people. The same people who are down and out were the same people who are doing all these great things. The tragedy is, and this is what Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots will somehow connect in the future. That's the tragedy of life. That looking back, you can look at all these things and say the dots are connected. But you have to ensure that the dots connect in the future as well. And that is where your personal characteristics and your own personal competence counts. So transformational leadership is all about a leader never leaving, never losing your winning spirit, challenging yourself and innovating each day, and looking at people at the heart of everything. Finally, fail to succeed. Life is not about only successes. Alexander Fleming threw out in frustration the petri dish that contained the bacterium that ultimately gave the world penicillin. He thought himself a failure in 1928, 90 years ago. It wasn't a failure. It got him the Nobel Prize, but he threw it out. A gentleman looking out for a pacemaker originally began his research on hypothermia, and then decided and found that when the heart becomes cold, it can be rejuvenated by electrical signals, and the pacemaker began. Chavannes was a scientist who wanted to make a unique wallpaper. In 1957, 60 years ago, he put together a bubble paper. It failed because it couldn't become a wallpaper. Some years later, IBM took it to wrap their personal computers. And today, it is considered a success and an essential part of every machine and every packing industry that you have. None of these inventions were meant to serve the purpose that they were originally meant to be. They came out of failures and they came out of accidents. But they came. In my own career, I launched a brand called Lipton Treetop. You don't even know about it because it vanished almost 25 years ago. This brand was one of the biggest disasters that there was in the fruit drink market. I was the brand manager on it. I took some of the brunt, but I learned a lesson in leadership then. Because my boss at that point in time was the leader that he was. He said, the guy who did the goof was me, not him. Don't crucify this 25-year-old fellow. Kick me, because I was the guy who was responsible for this huge project. Another lesson in leadership. If you want yourself to count, stand up and be counted. You cannot just wait there and pass on the buck and say, look, it's not me, somebody else, it's not me, somebody else, and hope and pray that this happens. We try to now institutionalize our learnings. From life's lessons, how can you make it within the organization? So we have different ways of doing it as a company. We look at different themes, how we can make ourselves a more learning organization, how we can make ourselves a more caring organization, how we can improve the order that we have and the processes that we have, and finally, how do we impart greater purpose to the organization? The organizations are driven by purpose and values. At Nestle, the value of respect is what we respect. Respect for individuals, respect for each other, respect for diversity, and respect for the future. These are important characteristics of what makes us what we are. In whatever you do, in whatever you run, in whatever you succeed in, ensure that you keep your purpose and you keep your values together. Some of you here will become Bill Gates. Some of you will have the erudition of a Sundar Pichai. Some of you will become a Satya Nadella. Some of you might even become a Zuckerberg. Some of you might become great entrepreneurs, great teachers, great artists, great professors. Something in which you will find your happiness. Something in which you will find your being. At every stage, my young friends, live your life on your terms. Live your life the way you want it to be. Don't live your life on the shadow of someone else's expectation. Because if you do that, you will not be able to keep your sparkle. Protecting your sparkle, protecting the energy, protecting your countenance, protecting your sanity, and protecting your self-worth is one of the biggest challenges that life throws at you. In today's day and age, in my time, the word depression never entered our dictionary. We never had incidents of depression. Today, depression is becoming a live issue. Why is depression becoming a live issue? Depression is becoming a live issue because it is a mismatch between expectations and your actuality. One of it. And if you want to keep your sparkle, ensure that you do what you want and try and remember the principles that I told you. A leader never leaves. Your people are at the center of everything. Adversity builds strength. Fail to succeed. And last but not the least, live your purpose, live your values in order to be great human beings. So that's all I wanted to share with you, my young friends. I hope this has been of some use to you.